I think my girlfriend has been trying to get me fired from all my jobs. Let me tell you about Janice, my ex-girlfriend. Our relationship went downhill pretty quickly, and it wasn't just a regular bad breakup. I'm talking about something truly crazy. It all started a few years ago. We had been together for 2.5 years. It wasn't that I didn't love Janice, it was more like I wasn't sure who I was yet. I had just graduated from school, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I needed a job. Any job. So, I was basically taking on every job I could find. I worked in places like cafes, bookstores, and libraries. I thought this would give me experience and help me figure out where I belonged. The problem was, I never lasted long at any of these jobs. Maybe you think I wasn't a good employee. Maybe you think I was a bad worker. You might be right about some of that. It wasn't all good. There were times I didn't feel like going to work. But, no matter how many times I tried to find a place where I could stay, something would always go wrong. I kept thinking I was just getting unlucky. It felt like a never-ending loop. People would complain about me, leave terrible reviews about my work, or even use the internet at work to look up stuff about me. I was shocked. I would get phone calls from people who seemed to know all about my personal information. Sometimes, I'd get called into a manager's office to get yelled at for something I wasn't even sure happened. I was fired from job after job for reasons I couldn't understand. There was always something weird and upsetting happening, and it was starting to wear me down. It was like I was in a scary movie. There were no bad guys, just random strangers who were constantly making my life difficult. It seemed like people were trying to ruin me before I even had a chance to get started. I even had the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching me. I just knew something wasn't right. The worst part? My girlfriend was always there for me. Janice would tell me that it was all just bad luck, and she would try to comfort me. She'd be so sweet and supportive. I didn't really understand why these bad things were happening, and I was so scared that it would ruin my chances of getting a good job. But Janice would reassure me that everything would be okay. She was my rock. She made me feel safe, and for that, I was truly grateful. One day, I got a job at a bakery. I had just graduated from school, and I felt lost. I needed money to make ends meet, and this felt like a good start. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something, and I felt grateful. For once, I felt like I was maybe, finally, getting somewhere. But a few weeks into my new job, my manager called me into her office. I was nervous but hoped she was going to give me a raise or promotion. She looked concerned and told me that someone had written a really bad review about an employee on our Google page. The person who wrote the review described the employee in a way that sounded like me, even though I thought I was doing my job okay. It felt like déjà vu. It had happened at my previous jobs, too. The review said mean things, and I told my manager that I thought someone was trying to get me fired. This couldn't be happening again. It was insane. My manager said she believed me and that she would ignore the review, but my gut was churning. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. So, when I got home that night, I decided to do some digging. I checked out the review myself, and I noticed the username was really strange. It was something like, Mick Myrtle. It sounded a little bit fake, but it was something that was in the same range of sounds, kind of fake but not really. It stuck with me, and I couldn't shake off this weird feeling of uneasiness. The next morning, I looked at the review again. It was still there. Suddenly, there was a little pop-up on the Google review. The pop-up read, Mick Myrtle, manager, has responded to your review. I froze. This was the same username from the other jobs. And the worst part? My girlfriend's phone had just dinged with the same notification. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was all in my head. But, I couldn't deny what I saw. The fact that it happened at this new job, the same username popping up, and Janice seeing the same exact thing. My mind raced. I couldn't believe what was going on. Why would she do this to me? I didn't understand. Janice was my girlfriend. We were in love. How could she do this? I just couldn't figure it out. She was my rock, my biggest supporter, the only person I felt safe with. I was so confused and scared. I felt so alone. That night, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out what was happening. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't eat, and my mind wouldn't shut off. I had a feeling that my girlfriend was hiding something big. So, the next day, I decided to take a big chance. I was so terrified that I couldn't think straight. I asked Janice for her computer password. She didn't think anything of it, and, thankfully, she was in the shower getting ready for work. While she was getting ready, I quickly looked through her emails. It was risky, but I had to know the truth. Then, it hit me. I had found it. An email Janice sent to herself with a spreadsheet attached. This was it. It was a file that listed all my personal information. It had everything: phone numbers, emails, passwords, work schedules, the names of my coworkers, and even some of her login information for accounts I knew she had used to lie about me and get me fired. It even had my coworkers' information. It was like she was going out of her way to ruin my entire life. I couldn't breathe. This was so much more than bad luck. It was crazy and terrifying. It felt like I was in some sort of twisted nightmare. I didn't know what to do. I was confused, hurt, and scared. I didn't tell Janice that I'd found the file. There was something about seeing the truth written down in her own words, right in front of me, that made me realize I didn't want to see her again. I felt betrayed and heartbroken. I needed to get out of the house. As soon as she left, I grabbed my bags and started packing. It felt like my entire world was crashing down around me. As I drove away from our apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd found and what it meant. I realized that I had been in an abusive relationship for far too long. I didn't know how I had ever been so blind. My mind was racing. I felt like a wanted man. Like I was being hunted despite nothing being seemingly out of place. My gut was churning, and I was sure that Janice would be coming for me. I needed to figure out my next move quickly. I called my boss at the bakery and told her I needed to take some time off, and then I drove straight to my dad's house. He lived in a different city, far away from where I'd been living with Janice. I was still shaking when I knocked on my dad's door. He looked at me with concern and pulled me inside. He immediately knew something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. We sat there in the living room. I was sitting in my dad's big armchair. I couldn't stop crying. I felt like my entire life was in ruins, like there was nothing I could do to fix it. I didn't know who I could trust, and I felt like I was living in a nightmare. My dad sat next to me, comforting me until I ran out of things to say. I had been through so much. My head was spinning. Finally, I told my dad what had happened, and he was stunned. I felt relieved to get it all off my chest. But I was so tired and my head felt fuzzy. I didn't even want to think about all the things I'd lost. It was a huge mess. But my dad had my back. He's a really kind man and always there for me. He got up and went to the phone and called the police. He knew he couldn't just let me go through this alone. I felt better with my dad by my side. It felt so good to have someone I could trust and lean on. We talked about everything. We talked about the emails I had found, the people who called me, the mean reviews, and how Janice had been involved in all of it. I felt angry, sad, and so betrayed. But even after I told him the story, I was still feeling scared, and my heart was pounding. It wasn't easy admitting everything. It was a horrible feeling knowing that the person I was so close to, the person I thought I loved, was the person who had been hurting me this entire time. It was as if my entire world had been flipped upside down. The next few days were a blur of lawyers, therapy sessions, and panic attacks. I couldn't stop thinking about what Janice had done to me. It felt so unfair, and it was so difficult to wrap my mind around it. It felt like I couldn't trust anyone anymore, and I had this feeling that Janice was going to find me again. I was terrified. I finally began to see that what I had gone through was abuse. It took time, but eventually, the pieces fell into place. My dad was incredible. He was my hero. He handled the legal stuff, called the police and the lawyer, and helped me find a therapist. The police didn't do anything. Janice wasn't really breaking any laws, but my dad insisted I get legal advice, just in case. I was a complete wreck, and I couldn't do it all on my own. My dad's support was the only thing that got me through. With his help, I started to find some stability in my life. I got a new job and a new place to live, and I'm taking steps to move forward. I had to leave my old apartment. Janice hadn't stayed there, but she knew where I worked. I didn't want to stay in the same city, where she could find me again. I just wanted to put some distance between us. I finally felt safe. Janice has not tried to contact me, but I still have my social media accounts set to private. I also try to keep my online presence low-key. My therapist says that even though I have made so much progress, there are times I'll always have trouble. And sometimes, I still get scared. It's like I have this feeling that she's still watching me, even if it's not true. But I'm doing my best to stay strong. And, despite everything, I'm so grateful for my dad, my therapist, and the incredible support from friends. I'm so lucky to have their love. They helped me get through some of the darkest times of my life.